Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and we are on week 4 of my little watercolor notebook series. If you're joining me for the first time, basically I've spent a couple weeks just filling out my sketchbook with watercolors that are making me happy. I hope you join me today and you can follow along with what I'm painting, or you can just paint whatever you'd like and just hang out while we paint together. If you haven't been to my channel before, my name is Winslow and I'm a watercolor artist and really just love to spread the joy of art. So let's go ahead and grab our paintbrushes and get started. So let's review what we've done so far. So this was week 1, we did this pretty little landscape. And then week 2 was this beach painting. Week 3 was this swan watercolor, and I think they all look so good together. So let's see if we can do one more this week. And if you're new to this series, we are trying to use this palette with all 4 paintings so that they turn out cohesive and look great together. And the purpose is also just to doodle a little bit in the sketchbook and practice doing something fun, because that's not something I do enough. So for week 4, we are going to be doing this little cottage on a flower field. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to be using this Winslow and Newton watercolor palette. You can find that on my Amazon storefront. That is linked in the description. But it is one of my favorite palettes that I've ever used for watercolor. I think the pigments are just great and it blends really well on the paper. So like all of my landscape paintings, I am going to start with the sky. I'm going to mix up a light blue color by using white and blue. And we are just going to start going across the top of the page here. I'm going to wet the entire sky area so that our paints blend really well. So I'm just going to add a little bit more color in there and drop some blue here at the top. And I like when the color is darker around the edges of the painting and kind of fades into it. So we're just going to lightly drop some clouds in here. I like to leave spaces white. That way you can see that they are light and fluffy clouds. So we're just going to continue wetting the area around here. And kind of like the skies in a lot of the painting in my other paintings that I've done in this series, we're going to add some light coral peachy colors. So I'm going to finish up with a little bit more blue in here though. Going to add that around the edge. And I kind of like to go in an upwards movement. Kind of helps with the cloud perspective when it's kind of more condensed in the middle and then you make them wider towards the sides. And I'm just going to add a teensy bit color right here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and take some pinker colors. We're going to mix up white with some red here. And I'm going to take this and just add that in here towards the bottom of our clouds. I want that to blend really nicely. So we're working with our paper that's wet. And if you need to re-wet it by swiping your brush across with more water, that is totally fine. I'm going to make sure that we're using this wet on wet technique. I love painting skies with watercolor. I haven't done a painting that's just like a full-on sky only without like a foreground, and I kind of want to try doing one of those. I always see people doing really pretty sky paintings and with like birds in them. I want to give that a try one day. This is what I kind of really like about this sketchbook series, is that there's no pressure to make these paintings perfect. We're just kind of practicing our techniques and practicing maybe different views that we wouldn't normally paint. A lot of times as an artist, I'm always wanting to maximize my time and make sure I'm using every second, for like making money. But, there needs to be a time to just invest in yourself and take time to learn. I think that sky looks nice and soft, which is what I love to go for in my color palettes. I love the soft look. So then we're going to move on to this foreground, and I'm going to use some of those pink colors that we just mixed up. I want to do a little flower field here. So I'm just dropping in some of these light pink or red colors, and we're just going to be pretty chaotic with our brush here. We don't need to draw out each flower. I want it to look nice and blended together. So once we put down this first layer, we're going to go in with some darker tones to kind of add in some of that dimension. But I hope you all have been enjoying this watercolor series. If you have, let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you want to learn how to paint next. Always looking for new ideas to make videos on. Okay, I'm gonna go in with some darker reds here. Maybe even add in a little bit of brown and blue. I like to have just soft muted tones. I don't want it to be too stark of a color. Maybe a little bit more red. So see how the paint is still wet? We just want to go towards the bottom of these flowers and let the bleeding do its work. It makes it just easier to paint this way too, rather than having to focus on each individual flower. You know, sometimes I do like to do more technical or precise paintings, but usually I just love the look of these loose paintings, and I just think that they look so inviting and calming. So this is usually the style that I go for. But if you have a different style, feel free to make your flowers more defined if that's what you prefer. Nice thing about painting is everyone loves different styles, and you can do whatever you would like. Okay, now we are going to go in with some greens here. So let's mix up a green, nice light green. And I always start light with watercolor, and we will go in afterwards and put in our darker colors. We are adding this green between these rows of flowers, and it is okay to touch the paint that you laid down because we actually want it to blend together a little bit. I'm just gonna drop in some more green in there, maybe towards the bottom of the green layer that I added. See how that added some good shadows. And then we are going to continue adding in our greens throughout these rows. And as you can see, the lines of green are kind of getting thinner. And that has to do with the perspective of these rows of flowers. So the pink is going to start blending together as we go back further. So we're at this point, we're just kind of doing dots of green. We don't want to make a stark line. And then on this side over here, this to me is just going to be kind of like a grassy area. We're kind of out of the flower rows, so I'm just adding green here. And you know what? I think that row of pink was too small, so I'm just going to go over that with green. See how you can just, if you make a little mistake, just go over it if you need to. And we're just going to take our darker green and drop that in right on the edges here. And I'm going to blend that in, make it more cohesive. Go ahead and take our dark color and kind of separate where the flower field starts from the grass, just like that. And now I'm also taking the green and going towards the back here where it's just grassy area. You want that to be pretty light green. If you need a thinner brush, you can always grab one. I always forget to switch brush sizes sometimes, and that's okay. You can use whatever works for you. Okay, now I'm actually going to revisit our flowers a little bit and continue layering them on. So I'm just taking some darker reds here, and I'm going to just take that around the bottom of our flowers. And this will just help define them a little bit more. Don't need it to be too exact with where we're putting it. And I'm allowing it to bleed into the green a little bit as well. We don't need to put it like everywhere on the bottom. I'm just kind of picking certain spots to tap that in. And I'm going to do that for these last few rows here, just to separate them a little bit. I love going to flower farms. We have a few around here in Indiana that I love. So let me know what your favorites are if you are in Indiana, or even if you're not, I'd hear about them. Okay, let's move on to our houses here. So I'm going to make our houses like a white or a gray color, just because I feel like we need a little bit more of a muted color. Since we've got color in our field here, I'm layering on this initial color, but then we're going to go in with some shadows later on. I'm going to make this other one maybe a little bit more gray, so I'm going to use some black in there, maybe a little bit of blue too, and I'm just going to spread that over the entire house. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so far of incorporating all these colors. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space for some bushes that are going to be in front of this house. So just like this. I'm going to mix the color on the house just a little bit more. I want to make sure it's well blended. I'm going to let that dry just a little bit before adding too many more shadows in here. So let's go to the trees surrounding the houses. I am going to be using a nice warm green. So we want to have green with maybe a little bit of yellow in there. And I'm just going to cover the entire tree area. And we're going to layer on this base coat before going in with some darker greens to add our variation. So I want some trees to be much taller than others. Having a varying tree line just really helps your painting look a lot more maybe realistic, or I don't know, that's just how trees normally are, is we've got a lot of variation. So then we're just going to add one more over here. Just make sure to avoid the roofs of your house. And now we're going to take a darker green, so go ahead and use some brown, maybe even reds, to give your trees just a little variation. So I'm going to mix up that a reddish green color and tap that in. So I'm going to have some trees have this reddish tone in it, and then some have like a blue. And that'll just help with how our shadows vary. I always like to use a combination of warm tones and cool tones. Okay, I'm going to use a cooler green, so let's go ahead and mix up a blue with our green, and I'm just going to add that here on our tree. I'm going to make sure it's darker towards the bottom. And we want to make sure that we leave some areas highlighted, so not putting any paint on there. And I'm doing the same to this side over here. I'm just adding in some of those darker greens to separate the trees a little bit so they don't look like one big clump. Go ahead and make sure the bottom is dark as we'd want it. And I just like to use a tapping motion. We don't need to be pressing too hard here. We want it to just be very light and delicate. And I'm going to do the same thing a little bit more on this side. Just adding in some darker colors along the bottom. And I got a little bit on my roof, but that's okay. I'm just going to go over it once I get to that part. Then going back to this side, adding in those darker greens. You can just continue layering on as long as you need to. You can always pause this video if you need to, or skip ahead. Okay, let's go ahead and revisit our homes. So I'm going to take some white and blue, and I'm going to mix up a shadow that I'm going to place that all across the side of our house here. And I just want to make sure that it is maybe a little bit darker towards the top or the underneath the roof here, and then it gets a little bit lighter towards the bottom. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this roof over here. I want it to be darker inside here. And then we want it to be, again, darker at the top and going to be gradually lighter towards the bottom. Then I'm going to go underneath my roof here, just giving it a little bit of a shadow under the roof. And this one I'm going to add as well. The shadow is going to be a little bit bigger. You can see, I feel like the shadows just really add the next level elegance to these houses. And I'm going to add a little bit of a black under this roof area. And I think that really just helps also define the shape of the house better too. So just continue layering on as long as you need here. Add a little bit more. So while we're letting the house dry, I'm going to add the bushes that are here in front of the house. So I'm just going to take a lighter green and just add that in. I do want it to be a little bit more of a warmer green, so I just added some red and yellow in there. Just that so that we can kind of differentiate it from the grass, which is a little bit of a cooler tone. Adding that in, we're going to go back with some darker greens around it. Okay, let's go ahead and take a darker green by using a little bit of black in there. And we're just going to define our bushes a little bit by going around some of them, putting it at the bottom, making sure we stay on maybe one side, like the left side of the bushes. And I think that really helps them take shape. And while we've got this darker green, let me actually just add a little bit more here beneath our little rows of flowers, just in some areas maybe. I always feel like I'm done with an area and then I wait on it a little bit and I'm like, oh, I just need to add something. So feel free to do that. Just take a break maybe and then revisit it. And that always kind of opens my eyes to see something that I maybe didn't see at first. Just because the paint looks different when it's wet. And once it dries, you might realize that you need to add a bit more. And that's okay. Paintings take time to do. So give yourself all the time you need to finish these. Okay, the last thing I want to do is the details on the house. So let's do the roof. And I want the first one to just kind of be a grayish color. So let's do a mixture of white, blue, some black. So let's just go at it for this one. Using my brush lightly to go across. We want to keep the color consistent. And sometimes that just means re-wetting your brush so you can let it blend a little bit better. I want to make sure that we're staying in our sketch here so we don't go too much overlapping the other house. And last thing, I think we're just going to take a little bit more color and just place that here at the top of our roof. But I think it looks pretty good. We add a little bit more down this line. While we're waiting for that roof to dry, because I don't want to risk blending it with the other one, I'm going to do some of the details on this house that we needed to revisit. So I'm just doing a little bit of, I don't know what these are called, an arch, the little, sometimes there's like a mini roof over the door. I don't know what that's called. And then I'm just going to take a nice light gray, and so I'm mixing black and white. And I'm just gonna make the door in here. We wanna make it not completely stark black. If you get a little paint on the house, like me, you can just dot at it and then take it away with a paper towel. I always do that. I'll get little dots in places I don't want, and you just need to remove it with a paper towel and it'll be okay. Okay, and then I want to make our little windows here, just basically little black squares. Not too much detail on this. And then let's go ahead and add our door on this one. And I'm gonna use some darker black to add it to the side of it. And now we are good to revisit our roof. So let's go ahead and just spread this nice orangey red color all across. Again, we want to keep the color consistent. And then we might go in and add some more of our darker colors, but just go ahead and use a brush to spread this all across. Okay, and lastly, let's go ahead and take just a darker color. I might even put some blue in there. Because I want to add a little bit of this darker color right here where the other roof is going, so it might be a little bit of a shadow here. And maybe put that across the top. And I am happy with how that roof looks. So here is what our final fourth painting looks like. And I think we did a great job with this palette. It's actually, I think, one of my favorite ones in this series. I think it really followed the palette well. So let me know in the comments below which painting was your favorite in this series, and let me know what you want to paint next. With this being the final week in our watercolor sketchbook series, I hope that you have created something really beautiful, and I'd love to see it. Go ahead and reach out to me on social media. And like I said, don't hesitate to go into my comments and just let me know what you want to learn how to paint next. As always, I'd love if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we paint again next time.